So good morning, everyone. I am here with Jill O'Boyle, who is, it's Monday morning for me, Jill, and as soon as I said your name, I forgot the name of your organization. So why don't I go ahead and just hand it off to you?
Sure.
And have you introduced yourself and tell us who Jill O'Boyle is?
Yeah. So I'm the founder and owner of Jill O'Boyle Communications, and I am an executive coach for high-achieving women who are looking to restore control and faith over their lives. So help the women who are dealing with, burnout, busyness. They're just got to a point in their life where they are just stuck in some capacity. And I just really help them to renew their mindset and shift their thinking on some things. So yeah, happy to be here.
Drill down, if you don't mind, into that a little bit and flesh that out a little bit as far as what you do to help people, the type of women you do help in that context here, without getting too much into your personal story just yet. Drill down into that just a little bit, what you do.
Yeah, so I relate to a lot of women who are high achievers, mostly because I am one of those myself. And so I help women who are constantly feel like their life is spinning out of control. They're busy doing all the things, but yet at the end of the day, they're feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, burned out, stuck. And so most of the women that come to me are looking for this missing piece. They're like, I have been successful in my career. I have taken the chosen path that I feel like I was supposed to take. I've worked really hard to get to where I am right now, but yet there's just something missing. I have no joy. I'm not fulfilled. And I just don't know what else I would do. That's a lot of the words that I usually resonate. People hear that because I was there myself, right? And we're going to talk about that later. So what I do is really one-to-one coaching with my clients to figure out what are the roadblocks, right? What do you keep bumping up against? And so my coaching work is really around mindset, productivity, communication, and purpose. And so I really help. I'm a person that thinks business is personal. And so a lot of my clients that work with me, they're like, Jill, you're some part of like a business coach, a life coach, and a therapist all in one. Because I really do get to the heart of the human being. We have to first know who we are. And in order to do that, then we can capture our work a lot better. And that's a lot of times what people are missing is, I don't know why I'm here, who I am. And when we don't know who we are, we will find ourselves spinning out of control.
Wow. Yeah. So people, women in particular, but people in general who are very high achieving, but have that, I think the term you used was missing piece.
Yeah.
Well, that you got a pretty large market there. So there's quite a few people that fit that general description and see themselves in what it is you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a couple of different chats, brief, and I got familiar with your backstory that led you to where you are here. There, I don't know whether we call it a seminal moment or kind of life happening that led you to where you are right now in your coaching business. But kind of before we get into that, talk about where life was or where you were, the person you were prior to that time in your life that was transitional or transformational.
Sure.
What was like, I'm sorry, say it another way. What was life like before?
Before, sure. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I'm a coach now. But back before I became a coach, right? I always say a coach always has a story. And so growing up, I was definitely a girl that always knew I don't think I actually knew it, but I just trusted my gut instinct. I didn't really know what that was, but really whatever brought Jill joy, Jill did. So if it felt right in the moment, I just did it. And so I was a pretty outgoing, free-spirited person, knew kind of my path that I wanted to take, and really followed that path for a long time. And as I was doing that, like I said, everything that I did pretty much worked out for me. I trusted that gut instinct. And so I know we talked, Mark, over coffee. I'm a beach girl, but I'm living in Indianapolis right now. But at a young age, I was like, I am a beach girl, and we would always go to vacations down south. Never wanted my beach vacations to end. And so when I graduated, like that's just kind of what I'm talking about. Like I was like, I told my parents, I said, I will be going to the Carolinas. That is what I'm going to do. And found myself there doing, my background was in event management. So planned weddings, truly loved what I did. And then for about 5 years of brides and mother of the brides, I thought, this is getting a little old. And so I met my husband, found myself in Indiana and landed at a job that I was like, this is perfect. It was, I'm very good at communication, organization, project management. And so I found myself at a corporation that aligned with those skill sets. And so I was able to bring that kind of event management and project management skill set into a corporate setting. So no longer dealing with brides and weekends, but able to use that into a corporate setting where I worked with many different industries. And so I loved it. And I was like, when I found that corporate job, I was like, this is it. Like, I will be here rest of my life. I will climb that ladder, be VP here. Loved it. And I grew really fast there and was project manager, became senior project manager, and then was promoted to overseeing our department. And it was in those years where I really just started to lose that fire, joy that Jill had, everything. Then it was like I had turned a certain year in my life and became a mom and a wife. And I started to believe what I think our world and culture and society believe. And I started to just forget about that young girl fun, what naturally sparks joy and my gifts. And I just really put my attention to what I think our society really believes. And that's this, need for speed and image and perfection and busyness. And I thrived on that. And so I just kind of made that my focus. And so through that job, I really started to lose my way. It was a corporate culture that was very much a 24/7. We say, yes, that is what we do here at the sake of your time, your family. And I don't want to put them down, but I just feel like that was the mindset there. And so it was just, we go above and beyond for our clients, and we did amazingly awesome things. But I started to really adapt that same culture and those values, which were so off from my, again, values that I had as a young girl when I entered the workplace. And so I started to just change my values to align with this busyness and, your job is your job is everything, basically.
You bring up a good point, and it reminds me of something I've said for a lot of years now, and I've said it sort of tongue in cheek, but it aligns with what you're saying. Is that I've said, look, as long as we have this thing that you're describing as the American dream, pharmaceutical companies will make a lot of money by selling us all antidepressant medications, because we fall into what you're talking about is such a common story up to that point there. Yeah. So anyway, not to derail, keep going.
Yeah. So I think, so my story before I hit I know we'll get into that. It was a rock bottom moment, but my pre-story was, hey, I had all these gifts that, I'm a woman of faith that God has given me. And I think I really trusted those gifts and followed those. And those were leading me really well until all of a sudden I started to adapt a belief that doesn't matter. The paycheck, the money, the title, right? I was really, chasing titles and money. And I think what happened was I started to really get my whole identity and self-worth tied up into my career. And because of that led me down a really dark path, a really dark valley of detours, shame and guilt. And I know we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so.
Yeah. So get in if that, yeah, get into that if you don't mind. Talk about what kind of what happened there.
Yeah. So as I journeyed along, creating this mindset that, back then in those moments, in those years, my mindset was always more is better, success equals more. And so it was in those years that was my mindset. And I was going to do whatever it took to keep climbing that ladder, to keep reaching success. And so by doing that, the hours at the office got longer, right? The projects, as I was constantly getting promoted, right? Promoted by working 24/7, right? So I became a manager, and I was so excited to be the manager of my department because my natural gifts is enablement, motivation, and discernment. And so what I could see in our company was, wow, this team that I have right here, if I could become the manager and really, motivate them and get them excited and just, I'm a people first type person. So I was super excited to like get off of the projects and actually get into management. And so that was the plan, but the plan just kept getting derailed. Like, yes, we know that we have to get you into just managing people, but for right now, we're going to have to keep you on these X amount of clients. And so the type of person I am, if I was the manager, I'm going to be the manager first. And so I would put all my energy during the office hours for my team, which meant I still had projects and clients when I got done. And so my personal clients took my energy at the end of the day, right? So then that's pushing my family away. So here I am working late at the office to get everything else I needed done, getting awarded, $1 million projects, traveling a lot because we were a company that did large trade show exhibit displays and would go be on the trade show floor to reveal those. And so what ended up happening was basically prioritizing work over family, pushing my marriage aside. I was so stressed and overwhelmed that most times I would just numb the stress, the distractions with more and more alcohol. And so I found myself in a really rock bottom moment in my life where I had attached myself to a coworker who was also doing large projects and found myself in a middle of an affair, just completely spiraling out of control. Not the person that young, fun living, faith-based, value-centered girl, and just completely in a rock bottom moment that I was like, how did I get here?
Where did you, when you hit that rock bottom, did you feel it specifically at that time? Did you know at that moment that you were at rock bottom?
Not right specifically at that moment, but it was with just a couple, throughout those months, I could feel myself being like looking in the mirror and just not really recognizing the woman looking back. I completely knew at that moment, who am I? What happened to the fun Jill? And it was in those moments of just really peeling back some of these layers to figure out, how did I get here? And what led me, what's the root, right, of this? And so it was in a lot of, just through that, finding, every woman that I coach, says I have no time. I have no time. And that is a lie of the enemy. We do have time. It's about boundaries. I had none. It's about priorities and our values. And all of those had just either they were non-existent or they were completely backwards. And I look at that because if back then, this is 7 years ago, I mean, if you would have looked me right in the eye and said, what's number one in your life, I would have told you my family is number one. But there was no actions, words that would prove that statement to be true.
We all tend to say the right things, and the congruency between words and what we actually do are usually to tell.
Yeah. So it was in that moment, some hard years. That's that's something where I think a lot of people, when they hear my story, they say, okay, how'd you make that work? And it is not overnight, absolutely. Because the great end story of that is that my husband and I are happily married. Our marriage is actually better today than it ever was before. That's a testimony of for me, like I said, is a testimony of God. He was the biggest saving grace in our marriage. And he revealed a lot of things to me in those years. And so it was with work for sure, but a lot of faith and trust and a lot of going inside. So I think the biggest thing for me was, so often I was going out here, the external, and we do that as people that, something happens to us. I think most, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think most people, our initial reaction is, well, it's your fault that I'm here. You're the reason why I had this happen. It's either, my husband, or it was the work, my culture, my boss. It was a toxic place. Like I could have sat there all day and told you 800 reasons why this was not my fault. And I started to go there. So that's why I said, when you said in the rock bottom moment, did you really no? And I would say no, because it was a learning process for me.
It's amazing. Time tends to be, looking back in retrospect, things become clearer.
Yeah.
More clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that, the line that says time heals everything. Although that can be true, it doesn't heal it if you're not willing to help yourself first.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in here because you said something I think very important here. One of the things, I'm going to say it to the way I tend to articulate it, and we talk about it at Life Forward.
Yeah,
is victimhood. The way I've described it in the past, or come to describe it, victimhood, blaming others for the situation you're in, even if it's warranted. I use the analogy, it's a drug. It will give you great comfort in the moment because it's not your fault. Right. It's not our fault. It'll also become, it's a massively addictive drug is the victimhood or externalizing the problems.
Yep.
And it will also keep you from growing. Once you claim victim, as long as you're clinging to the externalization or victimhood, you're screwed. You're not getting out of the problem until you let go of that.
Right.
So talk about that for a second from your perspective.
100%. So that's exactly what was happening was, and I was very adamant that, hey, I got here because of all these X reasons. And because of that, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Very stubborn personality. And, was like, I'm doing it my way. And again, you can look back now and I could see all the signs where I feel like God was trying to intervene. But I think it was finally at the point where he was like, all right, you do you, go do you, and you'll learn. And it was in this quiet and stillness for me where I had an act of surrender. And I'm like, there's no more blaming here. There's somebody else involved. And that's, she's right here. And so it was a lot of, I started to just think back and I'm like, what are the patterns that have gotten me to this situation? And what unhealthy habits have I started to form? And what healthier habits can I take to get back to that person I was so craving to be? I mean, really, this was an identity issue. I was trying to find love from all the things. But I had it. I was just looking for external validation. And so some of the steps that I took was really deciding, okay, I am going to make time for me. And it was in some morning stillness, journaling, really creating that 30 minutes before my household woke up when I had young kids at the time. Because I just felt like I had no time for me at all. And people throw around self-care loosely and that's not going and getting a spa or getting your nails done. But really, self-care is just taking care of yourself. I was not taking care of myself at all. I mean, I was just drowning it in alcohol and distractions, just numbing that's alcohol is just a distraction to the root of what's really going on. The infidelity was just a distraction to what needed to happen a long time ago in our marriage was communication. And I was great at communicating in my work, as a project manager. But in my home life, I wasn't communicating anything. Wasn't communicating any of my needs that I wanted, and vice versa, for my husband to communicate to me what he needed. And so that's a huge part. That's a whole nother conversation for marriage counselors. I'm not a marriage counselor, right. But it was in those moments of stillness where I started to really think back. If I want to be that person that I used to be, that fun, loving, motivating type of girl, followed her intuition, what do I need to do to get back there? And one was really looking at my values and where did I get off track and start implementing those back in. Making, if God and family are number one in my life, okay, what do I need to do to make that statement true? That's setting boundaries in my work to leave the office at 5:00 and actually leave. Don't let other people get on my plate, block that 4 to 5 so I can actually clean up my stuff and get out. And so there was definitely things that I did to get back to that.
So, one observation that you made here now I've lost my train of thought on that, but I want to take a step back. I don't recall the exact term you used a couple of minutes ago, but I want to ask what and we'll get to what, the other side of this here in just a second, but you said something about that jogged my mind. Was your part of your healing journey, to use that term, starting that, did you go inward or did you seek that externally? I know you've talked about God and the role that God has played in all of this. Talk about what that getting to the healing side of things, what that looked like, whether that was an inside job or if you went outside for help on that.
Yeah. So I think a little bit of both. One was first and foremost, I went internal. I am very much of how as a project manager, I want to figure out all the things. So I was like, how did I get here? And I really wanted to do a self journey back to figure out what really is going on with me. And so it was, a lot of creating those morning routines and stillness, which was 100% a game changer. Creating time for me actually made me more productive in my work. And right. So it's one of the biggest things that I use when I coach women is we can make time for ourselves and you will see the benefit of it. And just the journaling was a huge thing of just bringing, getting quiet enough to hear my own thoughts, God's thoughts, and writing those down. So really going inward with that, setting boundaries was big, making priority, family. But externally, I cannot dismiss the power of connections and divine connections. And so during that hard time of my life, there was some people that was not by coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. There was just some people that I believe God ordained, divine connections, that came into my life at the right time, that spoke life, wisdom, guidance over me. And it was because of these people that I truly also believe where I am today in my marriage, in my career. And so I just really don't want to dismiss that yes, go inward, right? But then be open enough to see the people that are coming around your circle and let them know, actually talk about it. And so that's what happened is I just started to talk about these things that were going on in my life. And I had some not even professional counseling. I did get a coach later, after year 4 of digging all of this up, internally and with some connections, then a coach, came along my path. I found her on a podcast. She's in California. All the things are lining up in our lives. And sometimes if we're open enough to see them and just think, what if I just lean into this connection? What if I just lean into this coach? What if I lean into whatever is coming about? A lot of times we don't. We kind of just push those away and we stay right here. And we cannot do that. I mean, these people are coming along our path for a reason, I believe. And so there was some great people in my life.
I agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. Is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
That the people who come into your life are so seminal and so important in terms of getting past hardships. And you bring up a really, really awesome point that I think gets missed. And I want to isolate that for a second. And that is that you did both. You turned inward and you also turned externally to ask for help. One of the big things that I talk about a lot is being willing to reach out and get help is one of the greatest signs of courage. But when we talk about getting introspective, as you were articulating, that's an important part. And then reaching out for help is also an important part. And I think that the effectiveness of one is heavily reduced without the other one added. So I think there's a yin yang to that whole thing. And you articulated that really, I think really well.
Absolutely. And I think in my journaling, I saw the patterns of that happening was, the enemy loves to get us alone with our own thoughts, not God's thoughts. And I saw that in my own life when I was putting my identity into my career. That's all I could think about was my work. And so it was getting up early, going into work, coming home late at night, getting the, dinners done, kids to bed, getting back on the computer. And so there was just years. And I had friends and I would catch up on sometimes on the weekends, but not like meaningful connections. There's a difference. And I feel like there were so many years I was just going through my life in isolation, even though I had a husband here who loved me 100%. I had kids who loved me. I needed some type of more connection in my life. And I was craving that, I think. And I just didn't know how to turn to find the right meaningful relationships and connections to talk through.
You and I remember that this is me we're talking about here. I forget. Now you remembered or reminded me, if that's even a word.
Yeah.
That one of the things that I observed from that you also brought up something that I think people can get something from, and that is whether you're talking about a spouse or a life partner or a close, whatever the relationship is, once the walls of communication get closed off or break down a little bit, it tends to be on both sides, and then it becomes a snowball effect. Is the resentment kicks in, and then one party shuts off communication a little bit more. The other party gets a little resentful of that. They do it, and it becomes a vicious cycle downward.
Yeah.
And just as we talk about at Life Forward here, is when the problems start, we find very dysfunctional ways oftentimes of dealing with it, and then it becomes its own cycle.
Yeah.
So now, I didn't mean to, you were getting ready to say something. No? Okay.
Nope.
So you have done, I think, just an incredibly masterful job of using the problems that came into your life to make something very good come from that. So talk about the other side now.
Yeah. Oh, I love the other side.
It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, right? And I am a firm advocate for anybody listening that, life can be difficult and hard, right? But I am a firm advocate that there is purpose in our pain. And if you can lean into understanding what that is, so many of us say, why is this happening to me? And I challenge you to think about, why is this happening for you? What is coming greater on the other side? We will always rise up, but it's a choice. We have to choose to rise up out of that ashes, out of that pain, out of that misery. Like, we will not stay stuck there forever. But we have to make that choice for ourselves. And so that's exactly what I did. The inward journaling, looking at my journey, figuring out where I made the wrong detour, and trying to get it back on path and knowing I'm not going to stay here forever. And that's the first thing I said is something has to change. And then the next question was, okay, hey, yeah, something has to change. But what about me? What habits have I allowed in my life that I need to change? Right. So it was twofold. And so it was like I said before, it was definitely a journey. And so there was resilience there. There was about 4 years that I went back to that same office where that other person sat and had to have faith and trust and knowing that this is not the place that I should be at, right? You know, my husband's back home. He has to have a level of trust and faith that my word is true, that nothing is happening. We've ended that. And so it was in those, really 4 years, I was kind of getting really upset with God too in a minute. Like I was like trying to find another job, another career in that same field, project management, because again, my mind said, this is all you can do, Jill. You've only been event manager or project manager. So just that, what else could you do potentially? And so I just remember interviewing and interviewing for several jobs in that same industry, just different place, right? And would get great interviews, would get second interviews, they would go quiet, nobody would respond. And I'm like, I am more than qualified for these positions. Like I'm taking a paycheck. I should be getting these. And I was getting a little upset, but it was in those moments of journaling where I finally saw the breakthrough. Finally just saw the light and really heard distinctly, like, no, you're not just going to take the same job at a different place and I'll end up finding yourselves overwhelmed, busy, and probably in the same boat. I'm calling you higher. Like this purpose, this pain was purposeful. And now I want you to go help others that have been through it. And so it was in that journey when I found a life coach, the one I mentioned before, in California of all places. I'm in Indiana. And, really started working with her as well. And so it was in my journaling. It was working with her, with all these other people that had come along my path, speaking life over me, was when I really tuned in to those gifts that I had way back when I was younger, and just started to think about this. Like, I've always been a coach. I mean, I was burned out because my office was a revolving door. Like all the time, people coming into my office wanting sound, advice, Jill, you always give great ideas, sound advice. Can I just pick your brain for a hot minute? That was constantly. And so that's, of course, what a coach does is really to listen. And I always say, like, I'm not the smartest person, but I do have a natural gift of discernment. And I'm just going to listen and I'm going to say, here's what I hear. How does that sound for you? And, so I think what I'm getting at is we all have gifts and strengths. And sometimes we don't even realize what the gifts and strengths that we have because we followed a pattern that either our parents have said we should follow, mm-hmm. or we've sought out money as our main thing. I'm guilty of that. And so we just go along the path of life of checking the boxes, and we get to a point in our life where we're like, I don't even love doing this. Like, why am I even doing this? And they find themselves loving something else, but they don't journey that because they're like, well, I can't do that. And so through coaching, through the mentors that I had, and just on my own self journey, I started to really see that, I want to help people. Most importantly, I want to help people that have been just like me be where I am right now and have freedom on the other side, fulfillment and joy. And that is exactly where I'm at now. Like I wish I could have seen this many years ago, but that's just not how life is, right? It's all purposeful. It was planned to be right here, right now. And so I love it. I love going on podcasts like this to share stories because somebody listening might be like, wow, that's me, right? And if I could have just helped them in today, that's fills my cup up.
And I so identify with everything you just said. I think it's amazing that anytime having problems such as what you outline, or, whether it's health or financial, no relationship, substance abuse, I mean, the list could go on.
Absolutely.
Life is going to throw bad stuff at us, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
But to use it, such as whether somebody turns it into a career path, which you've done, or somebody just chooses to take their pain, because so much wisdom, so much good, like you've been kind of touching on, comes from the bad, no matter what. And I just think that's people. I hope they listen to this part of this and listen very closely, because you have done something that I think is rare.
Yeah.
Needs to be far less rare, which is partly what we're all about and partly why I want to jump on this podcast with you, because your message is so strong on this. Take the bad stuff and use it as a means to help others, whether they're having the exact same bad happen. Everybody's having bad stuff. But the other thing is, regardless, the wisdom and what you get out of this, I'm sure you could attest to it, to this day, even though you're on the other side of the pain, now tell me if I'm wrong, you're getting a lot out of it yourself personally from the people you're helping, is what my best guess.
100%. I mean, there's no greater joy that comes for me is when I'm working with a client and they have these aha moments, right? Or we've done our work, and I just had this the other week. I get a text message, right, where they're like, a light bulb moment comes on even after the fact. Like it's like the 12 weeks were great, but now they're even like seeing it later. They go back and they're like, oh my gosh, I was sitting in church. I just got this download. Exactly what the pastor put on there is what you said. And I am loving my life. Those things are like, to me, that is way more than any money or anything I could buy. Like those words mean so much, and not just the words, but that they're actually living in their purpose, their calling. They found freedom from whatever it was, just like you said. Like we all go through battle, so it's whatever it was that they were going through, that they've become free from that, and that brings me joy.
I can't love that enough. So we're at that point of this conversation where if a high achieving woman wanted to reach out to you and inquire for your services, how would they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to jilloboyle.com. So real easy website. You can find my contact information there, or on LinkedIn at Jill O'Boyle. Probably the best two places to connect.
Okay, fantastic. Is there anything else, any stones we left uncovered? I very much appreciate your sharing the story.
No, I don't think so. The only other thing I would mention is if anybody is resonating with this as well, I also have a podcast. It's called Your Life, Your Story, Rise Up. And this is just like what Mark is doing. The same thing is I created a podcast, honestly, because I wanted to, in my time, if I could have had a podcast like the one I have and felt not so alone, it would have made a difference to me. And so that was my whole purpose of creating the podcast. So Your Life, Your Story, Rise Up is either me or a lot of different guests that share their battles to break through, right? What have they went through in their life? That is their story. And how did they rise up from that? So it's a great podcast if you're wanting just additional stories and encouragement and motivation.
And the podcast, I'm sure, is found pretty much anywhere somebody looks for podcasts, or if there's a specific way to find that podcast.
Yeah, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, pretty much most all of them. Yep.
Okay. Well, Jill, I thank you so much. There is so much to your story that unfortunately we're limited in time we can't do there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
We've done only a partial job. So I'll go ahead and float the idea. Please, if you would, consider coming back on and let's talk more and keep the conversation going. You're exactly the type of person. Your story is exactly what Life Forward is about. And so very much appreciate both your sharing your story, but also what you've done with your story to capitalize and help other people, use your story to help others. So really appreciate your time today and your willingness to share the wisdom. Guys, check out Jill O'Boyle on her podcast, and just really appreciate what you're doing and sharing.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the time, and I commend you as well. I love what you're doing with Life Forward. It's so needed. So really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jill. You have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
And all right. Thank you so much.